and welcome to ECCB Connects. This week, we continue our discussion on good corporate governance. We look at how good corporate governance and the internal and external auditor help to protect your interests at financial institutions. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I never knew we can travel in the OECS Economic Union with any government ID. Coke's coming.
The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, in celebration of their 40th anniversary presents OECS For Me, a special Check and Pledge production.
I got all your shopping. You have your lamb leg, you have your steak, you have salmon, and your caviar. But I forgot the bread. Here's $500 to buy your bread, Iglesia. But I am traveling tomorrow for a meeting in Antigua.
I knew this. You're not going to Antigua without me. I am going by sea calling to get some suitcases.
In your dreams, I am checking your passport.
Saturday, June 12th at 7 p.m. on the OECS YouTube channel.
I love Antigua. Antigua has good food.
And Sunday, June 13th at 3 p.m. on the OECS Facebook page.
Can my partner and I share a table with you?
Sure.
This production is co-funded by the 11th European Development Fund Regional Integration through Growth Harmonization and Technology Right Project.
Thanks for staying connected with us. This week, I have with me Raquel Glynn, Audit Partner at BDO Eastern Caribbean, and Melissa Simon, Senior Manager at the Internal Audit Department, Bank of Saint Lucia Limited. Raquel, Melissa, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. In our last program, we spoke with Dr. Chris Bart, where we looked at corporate governance, good corporate governance. So today we are going to continue this conversation, but we're going to focus on your specific roles as external auditors and an internal auditor with focus on the financial sector. So I'll start with you, Melissa. What does good corporate governance look like in the financial sector?
From my perspective, sound corporate governance in the financial sector, it requires the harmonization of the efforts of all the key players. I think first and foremost, we need to ensure that there's an effective legal framework, one that specifies the basic legal rights and the obligations of corporate entities, their directors, their shareholders, etc. It should also specify the disclosure requirements, as well as providing for the effective enforcement of the law. So even from a legal standpoint, we need to ensure that there are mechanisms in place to ensure that to ensure ongoing compliance with those requirements. I think from a supervisory or regulatory standpoint, we need the regulators to provide guidance regarding the tenets of good corporate governance. And that way, even their monitoring efforts should be focused on ensuring and assessing the adequacy of the corporate governance efforts of the players in the financial sector. I think even the professional bodies, such as the Accounting Association, the Caribbean Association of Banks, etc., they also can assist in the corporate governance efforts in terms of promoting and encouraging, good corporate governance principles. In terms of, the code of conduct, ensuring that the principles are clearly outlined, that's where they come in. I think even at a local government level as well, there's also the case that can be made for, leading by example. So by the very fact that they also legislate and supervise what's going on in the banking sector, their own corporate governance efforts also would ensure, that everybody is focused on ensuring that the right practices and the right principles are endorsed and supported throughout the banking sector.
In our last program, we learned that good corporate governance is a system by which an organization is directed and controlled. And of course, it involves different groups. You have directors, external auditors, internal auditors, frameworks. And Melissa just spoke about what good corporate governance looks like in a financial institution, about the importance of ensuring that these measures are put in place, they're adhered to. But you may say it, and you may say that you're doing it, but of course another arm of this is to really make sure you're doing it. And then this is where the police comes in. So you have the internal auditor who observes from inside, and then you have the external auditor who looks from the outside to make sure that you're doing what you're doing. So Raquel, as the external police, what do you look for in a financial institution when you're trying to ascertain and confirm that they are indeed practicing good corporate governance?
Okay, we're the friendly police. We give advice, not fines or tickets.
Actually, the word police is one we're shying away from. It's not. Yeah, it doesn't carry a good connotation at all. But yeah.
Yes, I understand. But yes, our job is really to examine what is going on in an institution and to give advice. If we see something that is not best practice or something that could be improved upon, we certainly do give advice in that context. But for an external auditor, one of the first things we do is to examine the institution as a whole. What is the system? What is the environment in which it's operating? And that is where corporate governance comes in. So the first thing that we would do is we look at the communication and how do you communicate integrity and ethical values to employees? So that is what we call it, the tone at the top. Mm-hmm. So do you have a code of conduct? Do you have a whistleblower policy, for example, where employees feel that there's an open door policy that they can report, issues that they might think are deviations from policies or fraud or other issues without retaliation? That is a very important factor in terms of corporate governance and that tone at the top. We look at commitment to competence. Are you hiring the right people? How involved are those charged with governance in terms of putting the right people in the right position? That is so influential in terms of a success of a financial institution, that you have the right people where they need to be with the right skills. In terms of participation of those charged with governance, that is an important factor also. When we do that, we're looking to see how involved is the board of directors. And I know there's subcommittees and ALPA committees and other committees that would be for financial institutions. How often are they meeting? Who is sitting on these committees? Do they have the requisite skills, the aptitude? Is there a charter in terms of who can be appointed to these positions? Are there requirements for appointing people to these positions? Are there regular meetings? How is that functioning? Are there minutes from the meetings that are recording the decisions made? So in terms of, it's not just having these structures in place, they must be functioning. There must be regular meetings, there must be regular reviews. And so as the external auditor, I'm very interested to see how this committee, what is the frequency of the meetings? What are you discussing? Are you asking questions? What sort of information is being fed to those charged with governance? Mm-hmm. Is it pertinent information? Is it timely information? Are they challenging management in terms of the information? And one especially important area is that risk analysis. Those charged with governance, are they involved in risk analysis? And one of the questions that people don't like when I ask them, and I always ask the challenge is, where would it be most difficult to detect fraud in your institution? And on the flip side, where would it be most easiest to commit fraud in your institutions? And so I challenge them in terms of, where is your risk analysis, and is that thorough? Is that a formal process? And finally, now that you have all of these things in place, and you've looked at your risk management, and you have assigned the right people to the right position, are you monitoring what is happening? Mm-hmm. So the monitoring function, are you making sure there's compliance with the established controls? Are you ensuring that there's compliance with laws and regulations? And so overall, as auditors, that is what we focus on. I mean, not exhaustively, but that's a good picture as an external auditor, what I am looking for when I think of corporate governance and when I think of, the entity level controls that are in place at financial institutions.
So as you call yourself the friendly police, when you go in and you see or you discover that an institution is coming up short in some of these areas, what do you do? What's your next step?
If we were to come across anything that is fraud or non-compliant with regulations, our responsibility is to report to the regulator because you are regulated in that instance. Yes, but apart from that, we basically discuss these issues with management and with the board of directors and with the committees. We let you know, these are the issues we found. This is not best practice. These are recommendations for improvements. And, we go from there. Management is normally very responsive to these things. At commercial banks, I'm as an auditor, I found that banks that I've audited are very responsive, very responsible in terms of taking advice on board and making appropriate changes as necessary. But it's only in the extreme case if obviously there's an issue at the bank at a fundamental level where something needs to be reported to a regulator, then that would be reported to the regulator. But generally what we find are areas of improvement that we certainly discuss with management and those charged with governance.
Now, what's the importance of good corporate governance to ensuring that people's wealth, people's money, that when they put them in these institutions, that their funds are protected?
It's critical that the corporate governance practices are sound, because these are the systems and the mechanisms that are geared towards ensuring that risks are identified and responded to in a timely manner. And conversely, if depositors and creditors have the assurance that the organization or the institution has sound corporate governance practices, it signals to those persons that their assets are being well managed, their funds are well managed, and that they can place some level of confidence in those financial institutions. So I think sound corporate governance is critical for ensuring or for preserving the level of confidence and trust that our depositors have in the financial organization.
I totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, what every customer of the bank wants to know is that their funds are secure, right, and that the people who are holding it have integrity. Yes. And that, they have their best interest in mind in terms of safeguarding these assets. And so corporate governance leads into that. Are the structures in place? Have the risks been evaluated appropriately? Are you monitoring to make sure that whatever controls have been put in place are, one, appropriate, and two, being followed? Because it's all well and good to have controls, but if they're not being followed, then that's where we have issues. And that's where we have, people making inappropriate decisions. And so corporate governance is really meant to, one, assess the risk, two, respond to the risk by coming up with appropriate controls and structures, and three, monitor the risk. And if all those things are happening, then that leads to confidence, I think, for every customer and every client of the banks.
Raquel and Melissa, you both perform a role that everybody doesn't really like. You're not the favorite in the team. You're like the police. You do it externally, Raquel, and Melissa, you do it internally. What are some of the challenges you've encountered in executing your responsibilities, Raquel?
Well, I think it all stems from, as you say, we're viewed as if it's an adversarial relationship, and that, an external auditor is coming to find fault, and that is our role, and it really is not. At the end of the day, an external auditor's primary responsibility is to give an opinion as to whether financial statements are fairly stated. Now, in order to get there, we have to look at different things in the organization, including, like I said, the corporate governance. And sometimes that creates a bit of reluctance in order to be open. People might feel that they're going to get in trouble if they say what really is. And so there might be some hesitation to, describe exactly what is happening in an institution, because sometimes we find that controls are on paper, but the actuality of what is happening might be different. And so our job is to dig into the facts, to understand, to do a paper trail, to really get a sound understanding. And so there might be some hesitation in terms of divulging exactly what is happening. And so, we work with people to overcome that. And as I explained, we explain that our job at the end of the day is to give advice.
I think the challenge for us as internal audit, because we sit in a peculiar location where we're part of the organization, but we're removed from operations. And again, that's deliberate to ensure that we're independent and that we can execute our duties objectively and effectively. And we report into the board of directors. And we know that corporate governance starts with the top, the board. And so in trying to assess governance practices and provide feedback, we are in effect assessing the efforts of the very board themselves. And the challenge is, how do you communicate, identify gaps or weaknesses or areas of improvement in terms of what they themselves have instituted. And I found, from my past audits, that the reception that I've received has been pretty good. The directors as well, they have a mandate, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. And the interest or their focus is on ensuring that they do the best job that they can. And that is why we exist, to provide them with a bird's eye view of what's going on in the organization and to give them timely insights on where they can make the required improvements, of course, to ensure that the organization continues to do its best.
So your message to the institutions you serve is really that we are here to help, we are here to make you improve. What is your message to the public?
Well, our message as external auditors is that we take our job very seriously. We issue an audit opinion that says, these financial statements are fairly stated. If that's not the case, then there's several different options: qualified opinions, a disclaimer of opinion, and adverse opinion. And for each opinion that we have issued, we have gathered the sufficient evidence. We have considered all of the circumstances. We have looked at the institution as a whole, and that you can have confidence that our opinion is valid because we have done the work. We understand the entity we have audited, and that we are confident and comfortable in issuing our opinion. So you can take comfort in an opinion that has been issued.
I think the message I would like to leave is that, our job is year-round. Our focus is risk-based. So we focus on those areas of highest risk to the organization. Those with the potential to cause the greatest financial loss to the organization. And we provide timely and meaningful feedback to management and the board so they can respond in a timely manner to stem and to mitigate those losses. In terms of our corporate governance efforts, we provide feedback on where the organization's practices, where they are and how they align with best practices, and we make recommendations for improvement. The placement of the audit function, in terms of our independence and our objectivity, it ensures that we can execute our duties without any fear of interference. And so, our very existence provides some level of assurance to the general public that there is ongoing monitoring and oversight of the practices, the activities of management, that the required feedback is being provided to the board so they can make the required decisions and make timely decisions, all geared at ensuring that the organization achieves its objectives.
You indeed play a critical role in ensuring that the institutions that serve us perform well and protect our interests. Thank you very much for speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
Thank you, Shimona.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Here's where we end this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Remember, ECCB Connects is produced by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. We invite you to join us again next week for another program.